Hi guys, Kelly the Cabin Chick. I wanted to make a quick video and talk about one of the biggest questions that I get asked, and that is how to find land and how to buy land. And this is something that I have personally dealt with because I built my tiny house on a piece of land that's vacant, and I think the process that I went through to obtain land would be most beneficial for you to know how to do, and some kind of out of the box ways to think, how to approach finding land and purchasing it. So I know a lot of people who think they want to build a tiny house feel like they have to build on a trailer because it skirts code. But I think at least from my experience, if you do a little bit more digging, there's actually a lot of code that you don't have to go by if you're building under a certain square footage. So for instance, on my piece of land, as long as I built under 200 square feet, I didn't need any building permits. Now I can't have that as a permanent residence. And if you have some other residence that you can say that is your permanent residence, then, I think that would be a viable option. And you can always have it, just be kind of a place that you visit. So, and then that's exactly what I built my tiny house for. So anyway, the other, I think, misconception is people think that they need to have land in the middle of nowhere that has very little zoning guidelines, and I challenge that as well because the land that I purchased to build my tiny house on is actually in a suburb, and I have neighbors, and obviously that's not in the middle of nowhere, and it's just about 40 minutes west of Columbus, which is Columbus, Ohio, which is a really large city. So definitely not within 100 miles from civilization. And the way that I went about this is a couple things. So I knew I wanted to build my tiny house on water because I love water, I love the woods, and it gives you that much more activities to participate in when you're with your family or just time to kind of get away. And so in Ohio, there aren't a ton of options that are not developed already to buy land. So there was this piece of land I knew that was right outside of outside of Columbus, and I looked into it. But I own a home. That's where I am right now. Is in my normal residence in Bexley, Ohio, and I don't have the income to support, getting a loan from a bank on undeveloped land without any plans to building a regular size home. So I got a little creative because I knew I wasn't, like I said, get a conventional loan through a bank. So what I did was I contacted the developer. So I would suggest doing this. If you find a piece of land that you like, contact the owner or the developer, whomever owns this piece of land that you'd essentially be buying it from, and say, hey, I am interested in your land. How about we go into some sort of agreement between you and I? So that's what I did. I contacted the developer and I said, why don't we do some sort of owner financing? And this is all legal and what you can have drafted up with a real estate attorney. And essentially the owner of the land, because he owned it outright, he didn't have any loans on the land, which that would make it challenging. If the owner of the land already has loans with banks, then this option probably wouldn't work. But he owned it outright. So I said, essentially, can I pay you for the land and you'd collect the interest over the time of the loan period versus me having to work with the bank and you have to work with the bank, and so he was interested. Because a lot of times vacant land doesn't necessarily turn over quickly. So it's an option. Sorry, there's some work going on in the basement and my power is off and apparently now it's back on. So it's kind of a win-win because the developer, owner of that land, sees us, well, now I have an actual viable option to selling this land that I'm not necessarily selling through a realtor or on my own or whatnot. So the developer of this land is essentially collecting a low interest of a loan between him and I, an owner financing agreement, and it's a 10-year loan. So he's not going to get all of his money over until a 10-year span, but he's getting interest on top of the sale amount. So he's getting that interest. He's getting money every month from me, paying for this piece of land, and we don't have to use banks. I think for $500, I used a real estate attorney to draft up the documents, and there was a closing and all that, but it was so simple, and I didn't have to, I think he did pull like a credit report and those types of things just to make sure that I can meet the note for the agreement. But that was something that worked, and obviously it's a little bit outside of the box, and it takes a little bit more legwork from you because you have to figure out who the owner is and who the developer is, but you can contact them and offer it. That might just be something they've never thought of, and if you take that proactive role in approaching that as an idea to whomever you're trying to buy the land from, they might say yes, and if they say no, then they say no, but at least ask and know that that is an option. And then again, so in terms of finding land, you don't have to find land that is in the middle of nowhere. I think a lot of people who are interested in tiny houses aren't necessarily always interested in building it on a trailer. So think about backyard escapes. Think about ways that you can have a family weekend getaway for the same reasons which I bought, or I'm building my tiny house for, is so we can't always afford to go on vacations and get away, but who's to say that you can't get away 40 minutes or an hour away from your normal home and residence. And for us, it's totally a escape, and I feel refreshed just like I would from a vacation on a beach or something, just kind of separating yourself from your everyday life, and it's somewhere you can go every weekend with your family. I know families or people with kids can't think of necessarily tiny living on a permanent basis, because 200 square feet with 2 or 3 or more kids is not good. So I really encourage the idea of having this be an option to taking vacations every year, because you get a vacation every weekend if you want. And just look into, if you have a home already, look and just call your city and say, hey, what are the restrictions to essentially building a shed in your backyard? Who's to say, I think most sheds have a light bulb in it. You're not moving in there permanently outside of your normal house. So it's just more of essentially a glorified shed, but make it awesome, make it kick-ass, have it be a theater room or an office or an art room, or where you put your in-laws when they come to visit. My home here in Bexley is just about 1,000 square feet, a little over, and me, and with 3 kids, that's pretty small. So having something, now it's not, my tiny house isn't in our backyard, but it's not to say that a tiny house can't be in your backyard. And all it does is take a couple phone calls. And that's completely within code. I think a lot of people need kind of a normal residence and would like to have a tiny house type of getaway or solution. And who's to say that can't be accomplished within your own backyard, especially if you have land. What if you're a little bit in the country or on the outskirts of town and you have that extra land that you could just kind of have that little getaway, where the glorified doghouse, I guess you could call it. But there are so many other ways to think about it. So don't get pigeonholed in thinking that if I want a tiny house, I have to build it on a trailer. I have to have this land that has 0 zoning restrictions or permits and all those types of things. There are ways to do this and build it with your family and be creative with the purpose and use of space, and do it, if not within your backyard, close to home. Just be a little proactive in making some phone calls and learning what are the do's and don'ts and possibilities that you can build within your means and within the realm of what you already have. And I think you'll be surprised. So that's my tip on finding land and buying land, and thinking just a little bit outside the box. And all the best to you. And let me know what you come up with, if these are some viable tools and tips that you find that are working for you as you're researching finding land and trying to purchase it. And share with me, and you can share them in the comments to this video or on cabinchick.com or our Facebook page. I look forward to learning more about your journey, and as always, thank you so much for following mine. Take care. Talk soon. Bye-bye.